Next important feature of every Shakespearean tragedy is role of fate and character behind the sufferings and the tragic death that falls upon the tragic hero, right? Both these are the contributing factors to the sufferings and tragic death that falls upon the tragic hero. And character and fate, they play a significant role in the tragedies of William Shakespeare. Greater role is played by character. To be more particular, a tragic flaw in the character. Every Shakespearean hero has a tragic flaw in his character, in his personality. And this tragic flaw largely causes the sufferings and the tragic death of every Shakespearean hero. For example, take the example of Hamlet. Hamlet's character has a greater role behind his sufferings as compared to the role of fate, right? And Hamlet has a tragic flaw in his personality. And due to this tragic flaw, he suffers and dies a tragic death, right? So his own personality, his own tragic flaw is more responsible for his sufferings and tragic death than fate, right? And fate also plays a part. Fate also plays an important role in bringing about these sufferings and tragic death, but it plays far lesser role as compared to the character, as compared to the tragic flaw of the hero in every Shakespearean tragedy. Right? For example, fate also plays a part, and the best example of role of fate is the tragedy of Othello. Othello suffers and dies a tragic death, not only because of his own character, not only because of his own tragic flaw, but at the same time because of role of fate, role of chance. Chance is one of the forms of fate in which it appears in the tragedy of Othello. There are certain chance happenings that, make Othello doubt the chastity of his character, right? For example, Desdemona by chance drops the handkerchief, and by chance the same handkerchief goes into the hands of Cassio, the man who is doubted by Othello having a secret affair with his wife. So two chance happenings, that one is dropping of handkerchief by Desdemona, and the other is accidental seeing of handkerchief in the hands of Cassio by Othello. They aggravate the situation for Othello. They further spoil the case for Othello. Othello, starts strongly believing that his wife has a relationship with Cassio after seeing the same handkerchief in the hands of Cassio which he gifted to his wife. So over here, fate plays a significant part in bringing about sufferings and tragic death upon Othello. The moment Othello sees the handkerchief in the hands of Cassio, he suffers from mental torture. He suffers from anger, that he starts thinking that the wife he loved a lot having a secret love affair with another man. So this adds to the spiritual sufferings, inner sufferings of Othello, and this inner sufferings further causes him, further forces him to commit the murder of his own wife. And later on, after the commission of the murder of his wife, he realizes his mistake. And when he realizes his mistake that his wife was innocent and he unduly killed his wife, then he commits suicide, right? So this is another important aspect of every Shakespearean tragedy, that is role of fate and character behind sufferings and tragic death that falls upon every Shakespearean hero. Next important aspect of every Shakespearean tragedy is conflict, right? It is said that no conflict, no tragedy. In fact, no conflict, no story. because the entire interest of a story, or in particular tragedy, lies in its conflict. If there is no conflict, there won't be any tragedy, there won't be any story. Why? Because the entire interest of the reader and the audience is won by, or it is created by, the element of conflict. So this all important element of conflict is also there in every Shakespearean tragedy. It is there in Hamlet, it is there in Othello, it is there in King Lear, it is there in Macbeth, right? Before going into details how this conflict is there in every Shakespearean tragedy, let me define conflict in general, then the types of conflicts in particular. There are two types of conflicts: external conflict and internal conflict. External conflict is the one that happens outside the main character, that is the hero, protagonist, outside the protagonist in every Shakespearean tragedy, and it happens on the physical earth, between hero and the villain, between hero and the party of villain, between the group of hero and the group of villain, between an individual and the society, between man and nature. These are the different forms of external conflict. So this external conflict happens in different forms and shapes in the stories, and this is also true of every Shakespearean tragedy. It is also there, external conflict is also there. And then on the other hand, there is internal conflict. Internal conflict takes place in the mind and the heart of the tragic hero in every Shakespearean tragedy, and it happens between two opposite forces in the mind and the heart of the protagonist. For example, this internal conflict happens between conscience and desire, good and evil, right, inside a character. So this is the definition of internal conflict. Now let me give you examples of these two types of conflicts from the tragedies of William Shakespeare. Take the example of Hamlet. In the tragedy of Hamlet, both the conflicts exist. Both the types of conflicts exist. There is external conflict as well as internal conflict. External conflict happens between Hamlet on the one hand and King Claudius on the other. Why this conflict is there? Because Hamlet's father is murdered by King Claudius, who is the current ruler of the state of Denmark, and Hamlet is asked by the ghost of his father that he should carry out the duty of revenge. So this is the example of external conflict between two individuals in the Shakespearean tragedy Hamlet. Then comes internal conflicts. This internal conflict happens inside the mind and heart of Hamlet, between the duty of revenge and instinct of justice. On the one hand, there is duty of revenge. On the other hand, there is instinct of justice, right? So this is an example of internal conflict in the tragedy of Hamlet. So this is another important aspect of every Shakespearean tragedy, that is conflict. Next important aspect of every Shakespearean tragedy is moral order. Moral order is the next important aspect of feature of every Shakespearean tragedy. Shakespeare's tragedies do not have poetic justice. There is no such poetic justice in Shakespearean tragedy. Good is not always rewarded, evil is not always punished, right? Good is is punished, right? But you can say that evil is never left unpunished. This is the moral order of every Shakespearean tragedy, right? That in every Shakespearean tragedy, there is no poetic justice. But still, every Shakespearean tragedy has the moral order of its own, the morality of its own. And what is that morality? That morality is that if good is punished in Shakespearean tragedy, then evil is never left unpunished. It is always punished, right? If a good hero dies a tragic death, then along with the good hero, the villain also dies. He is also punished in the form of death. Take the example of Hamlet. Hamlet no doubt has a flawed character. He has a tragic flaw in his personality, due to which he suffers and dies a tragic death. But still, that tragic flaw doesn't match the type of punishment that is inflicted upon Hamlet. So it means that the tragic death that falls upon Hamlet, it exceeds the magnitude of the tragic flaw that Hamlet possesses, right? So it means that he dies a tragic death. This is why we say that he dies a tragic death, because his tragic death is not in proportion to the tragic flaw that he possesses in his personality. Right? So there is no poetic justice. A perfectly good character, he is not perfect character. Hamlet is not perfect. He is good. He has more of a good quality in his personality, good qualities in his personality than bad qualities. He is a good human being. He didn't deserve a tragic death, but he did die a tragic death. So good is punished in the form of tragic death of Hamlet. But along with this good, evil is also punished in the tragedy of Hamlet. And evil is represented by King Claudius. King Claudius also perishes. He also dies a tragic death. So this is the moral order of Shakespearean tragedy. That there is no poetic justice in Shakespearean tragedy, but still every Shakespearean tragedy has a moral order of its own, a morality of its own. And what is that morality? Morality is, if good is punished, then evil is never left unpunished. So this is it for today, and this is the end of the part number 2 of my lecture, which I started off in the part number 1 of the video based upon the same topic, and the topic was Shakespearean tragedy. I hope what I told you in today's video is understandable to you, is comprehensible to you, and it will be helpful to you in your studies, in your academic career. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.